let's look at how we multiply terms in algebra. Okay, I've probably mentioned to you a billion times that mathematicians, we like to be efficient. In other words, lazy. If we can get away with writing something in a more simple way, we're going to do it. If there's a quicker way, we're going to do it. So when it comes to multiplying with algebra, we found a quicker way to write things. So rather than having to write 3 times a, we just write it as 3a. Pretty simple, right? So we've just taken away the multiplication symbol and we've smooshed them together. Now if you're watching any of my other videos, you're probably going to hear me talk about things being married together. That just means multiplied. Okay, it just means they're smooshed. If you see a 3a in a question, it just means that the 3 and the a have been married together, they're multiplied together. It means there are 3 a's. Cool. Alright, so let's go down here, let's go 5 times b. Well, you guessed it, it's just 5b. Cool. Alright, let's go down here. We've got a 6 times c times 2. So, 6 times c would give us 6c, and then we're going to be timesing it by 2, so that will give us 12c. Another way of doing it is multiply your numbers first, and then chuck your letter on the end. So 6 times 2 gives me 12, and I know that because it's all multiplication, there's not going to be any symbols happening in between, like there's no pluses or whatever. So I'm just going to be putting the c on the end. Cool. Alright, hopefully this is simple for you. So here again, I've got d times 10 times 8. So what I'm going to do is I am going to multiply my numbers together first, and then throw my letter on the end. So 10 times 8 gives me 80, and then my letter on the end is d. So it'll be 80d. Alright, now here, I don't have any numbers involved, I've only got letters. But it's the same thing. Whether it's numbers or letters, who cares? It's the same. So I've got E times F. You guessed it, I'm just going to write it as EF. Now here I've got G times H times I. I'm just going to swoosh them together and take out the multiplication symbol. So it's just G, H, I. And you know what? It actually doesn't matter what order I write them in. I could write I, H, G. Or H, G, I. It really doesn't matter, so long as they're all there and they're smooshed together, it means that they've been multiplied together. Let's have a go at this one. So we've got 7 times j times 3 times k. Now, if these were all additions, I couldn't do it. But when you have multiplication, you can. It's the only time that you can put together things that have different symbols. Multiplying is perfectly fine. So I'm going to start by multiplying my numbers and then just throw the letters on the end. So 7 times 3 gives me 21, and then I've got a j and a k. So j, k. Great. And then lastly, we've got L times 11 times 2 times m. So I'm going to multiply my numbers together first, and then just throw the letters on the end. So 11 times 2 gives me 22, and then there's an L, and there's an m. So 22LM. Great. So when it comes to multiplying, it's really the only time in algebra where you can join together things that have different letters. If you were adding or subtracting, you couldn't do it, but multiplying, you can. You can marry different things together through multiplication, all right? But you can't add stuff, only multiplying. All right, now let's have a look and see what happens when we are multiplying together the same letter. Okay, so remember when we had different letters, we just smooshed the letters up against each other. But it's a little bit different when the letter is the same. So thinking back to the very first introduction to algebra lesson that we had questions like this, p plus p. So what we did was we counted them. So, 1p plus 2p is equals 2p. But what happens if we're not adding them? What happens if we're multiplying them? Now, what you want to do is this actually means pp. Yeah, that's right, I said pp on camera. But that looks stupid. Like, what is that? Especially if you've got lots of them. You don't want to just be writing p. be a better way, right? And mathematicians, we are efficient. Okay, so again, similar to this, we're going to be counting them, but instead of putting the 2 in front, I'm actually going to be going p squared. That squared means there are 2 of them being multiplied together. Okay, so rather than having to write pp, which technically is right, I guess, but it's easier to count them and put the tally, like the total number, up here as an indice, and that's what we call these little numbers up here. So, have a think about how would we do this one? If there are 1, 2, 3, 4 cubes, we're not going to write 4q, no. That would be if we were adding them together. How do we do it if they're multiplied? I know that it's going to equal q, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to count them and put the count up here as an indice. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's q to the power of 4. Cool. Now let's have a look down here. I've got some w's and I've got a number. So thinking back to the first part of the video, I put the number at the start, then I'm going to put the letters, but how many w's do I have? I've got 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put that 3 up there as a power because there are 3 w's being multiplied together. Alright, and now down here, I've got a number times a number, so 3 5s are 15, so I'm going to put 15, and then I've got y's. So I'm going to put a y, and how many of them do I have? I've got 1, 2, so it's to the power of 2. Great. So it is very important to remember the difference between adding and multiplying, okay? So when you're adding letters together, you just put the number at the front. You count how many there are and put that number at the front. If they're being multiplied together, you count how many there are and that number becomes your indice, in the mini number at the top. Okay, cool. Thank you for watching.